Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of our podcast, Web3 and Chill. I'm your host, Aayush, joined with Vishal. And today we have Brian, who is the CXO of BrightNFTs. He's also a writer and a storyteller in this space. Hi, Brian. Thank you so much for joining us.
It's a pleasure. Great to see you both. Nice to be here.
Likewise. Hey, so we usually use the term CXOs as, somebody in the leadership position. They're either a CTO, a CEO, COO. Why you a CXO? What's the story behind it?
Well, it's a bit of a kind of a Web3 joke in a way, in the sense that people get to choose their own kind of descriptors. And I thought it might be the only opportunity I get to be a kind of a C-suite executive. So CXO stands for Chief Experience Officer. So it's to do with user experience. And for me, it's to do with bridging the gap between user experience and expectations and brand storytelling and narrative, because I think the two are kind of inextricably connected, at least in my head.
Mm-hmm. What's Bright NFT?
Bright NFT is an early stage startup which is focusing on the intersection of artificial intelligence and non-fungible tokens, or NFTs. So what we've done a lot of research on NFTs, and that's how I met the chief exec, Victor Munoz, who's originally from Chile but living in Valencia in Spain. Mm-hmm. We had both independently arrived at the conclusion that NFTs were much more important and much more far-reaching as a technological platform than you would be led to believe if you were just following the popular narrative in the media about cartoon apes and PFP collections and all the rest of it. So the bottom line is that we see NFTs as being a deployment platform for lots of different kinds of interesting and dynamic use cases, one of which is artificial intelligence. And obviously, we've seen in the last year that artificial intelligence is moving on in leaps and bounds. So we see NFTs as a kind of a delivery platform for a decentralized form of artificial intelligence. So that's basically the napkin sketch.
Wow, I'm really intrigued. So we have, the poster boy of artificial intelligence, ChatGPT these days, and then you have Mid Journeys of the world. And
Yep.
It is centralized. I go there, I type it out. Hey, give me something, they do it. You mentioned that you're trying to marry AI and NFT and use NFT as a platform where people can come and I'm not sure if I fully understand it, but you're somehow trying to develop decentralized AI.
Right.
What does that mean? How is it different from a Chat GPT or a Midjourney or any other tool out there?
Yeah, I mean, I think it helps to go back to kind of first principles here and understand that, I mean, the way I've described it is that Web 2.0, so companies like Google and Microsoft are kind of, this is a bit of a cruel way of explaining it, but they're metastasizing into AI 2.0. So in other words, there's the same paradigm at work whereby it's a centralized operation and the value and the data is all extracted at a choke point, a centralized choke point, in very much the same way that Web 2.0 currently operates with people like Meta and Google and Microsoft and all the rest of it. But I think we're familiar with that, what that means in terms of skewing the social outcomes and the extraction of value from these networks. So what I'm thinking is the convergence of Web3 and AI is equivalent to what we might call AI3, in the same way that we see a distinction between Web 2.0 and Web3. So really, it's trying to find a decentralized architecture where the value is not extracted but is shared between the network participants end users, people like you and me, basically.
Got it.
And
Got it.
I think that's extremely important, because I think the implications of Web 2.0 metastasizing into AI 2.0 are going to be dramatic. They're going to be much more profound over the sort of even a medium time frame than the influence of Web 2.0. So I think it's very important to get ahead of the story and to try and find ways of creating a decentralized architecture for AI. So that's really what we're focused on.
Got it. Got it. It's truly visionary and looking forward to see how it comes to its full life. Slightly changing the direction on the conversation. I was going through your profile and I was really intrigued, and I really loved the note that you wrote on the timeline of NFT. So for
Mm-hmm.
our viewers, would you like them to take them through the timeline of NFT that you created? I think it would be a great fun.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it's very much a work in progress. I'm sort of in the early stages of mapping out a book on crypto, which is to do with explaining what this incredible mess is all about to people who have are clueless or confused, because it's such an incredible mess. So really, it's a question of unpicking that. So my kind of approach was to start trying to create a series of timelines, just to act as a kind of a thread that might run through some of the storytelling that would appear in the book. And so the timeline of NFTs is quite interesting. I would put the kind of like the first piece of the puzzle way back in 1993, when a gentleman called Hal Finney, who was part of the cypherpunk movement from which Bitcoin evolved, wrote a bulletin board note about what he called crypto trading cards, and his explanation, looking back at it, was very indicative of what became NFTs. And then in around 2012, there was a project on Bitcoin called Colored Coins, which was looking at what we might now call asset-backed NFTs. So using the blockchain to create a means for representing real-world physical assets. And Bitcoin sort of had some structural problems in terms of this non-fungible token landscape. So things were quite slow. There were other players that came in, but another point is a chap called Kevin McCoy released an artwork called Quantum in 2014. So that was the first kind of sort of one of one, what you might consider a kind of piece of fine art or an artwork, an NFT artwork. But things didn't really start picking up until 2017 and 2018. In 2017, we had two key projects, CryptoKitties and CryptoPunks, which are still around. And obviously, CryptoPunks is considered one of the kind of like the Grail AAA NFT collections now. And in 2018, there was a token standard that Ethereum developed called ERC 721, which is basically when NFTs became what we consider to be NFTs now, in terms of having the technical structure to underpin NFTs at scale and NFT collections and smart contracts and all the rest of it. And then it kind of exploded from there, really. We had gaming and early metaverse stuff. And then in 2021, I think somewhat spurred on by the global pandemic and change in online behavior and all the rest of it, we had the Bored Ape Yacht Collection, which by the end of 2021 was already sort of very big. We had Beeple, the artist who sold work at Christie's for $69 million, which was an outrageous sum of money and created a big stir. We also had Sotheby's and Christie's talking about NFTs as being a central part of their kind of like game plan going forward. And I think that raised a few eyebrows, because Christie's and Sotheby's have been around like forever, and for them to say NFTs were important, I think got us beyond that kind of stage where people were looking at it saying this is just a fad, like they did with crypto. It's dying, it's dead, it's over. We've had that so many times with NFTs. And then we had Gary V and V Friends, and he sounded like a bit of a madman at the beginning. But obviously, if you've been following Gary V for a while, you'll know that when he sounds like a madman, he's actually just streets ahead of the curve.
Yeah, that's true.
And we've had some very interesting kind of explorations of this new platform for art by people like Damien Hirst, who launched a project called The Currency, which was a series of real world art pieces, a series of dots that had been applied on canvases that had been cut into sections. And the idea was that people who bought the NFT could either decide to redeem the artwork or keep the NFT. And in the case that they kept the NFT, Damien Hirst burned the physical equivalent. So that was a very interesting experiment. And then obviously we came to 2022, and we know with Terra Luna and all of the contagion and all of the CeFi institutions going out of business, and then FTX and all the rest of it, NFTs kind of crashed, and everyone started again talking about NFTs are dead. But we've seen NFTs spread out from their original kind of early use case of PFP collections and artwork into a whole range of areas, with large brands adopting them as finding more granular ways to develop relationships with their customer base. We've had this concept of community rather than customers, so that customers are now community members. We've had token gated stuff. We've had NFTs used for a whole slew of different use cases. So it's really exploded. And that's a kind of basic sketch of the timeline.
No, I think NFT, it's a great story how NFT has evolved from such a long time to exploding back in 2017 to now. Yeah, I think that's a great history or summarization of NFT's journey so far. Yeah, Ayush, you were saying something?
Yes, Brian. That was great, man. Could you tell us more about other use cases? So we have seen it being used for token gated communities, or even as loyalty programs. But are there any other really good use cases which you see might become really popular in the coming year or years?
Yeah, I mean, there are a couple of things really. I mean, I think NFTs are just almost too big to label as being a single kind of thing, really, because we've already seen, for example, fractionalized real estate deals beginning to sort of happen. So we have to look. I mean, basically, there are two kinds of digital assets in general terms. Some of them are fungible, and they represent a medium of exchange like Bitcoin or Ethereum. One Bitcoin equals another Bitcoin. And then there are another set of digital assets which are non-fungible, which means each one is unique. And so effectively that means that anything that is unique can be represented as an NFT. And there are lots of things in the world that are unique, but buildings, real estate, land, all of that. We've also seen NFTs being used to represent virtual real estate in world, as it were. But I think a really important area to consider is what people are referring to now as dynamic NFTs. Effectively, what that means is that NFTs, or rather the things that they can represent, because NFTs are almost like kind of a certification layer for other things. In other words, NFTs point to things. So an NFT points to a bored ape that lives somewhere else on the blockchain, for example. But the idea of dynamic NFTs is that NFTs can also change over time. So, for example, what we're looking at in terms of artificial intelligence is that you could start with a primitive AI, and you could involve yourself in a training procedure where you actually, you use different data sets and you specialize the AI into certain areas, and that journey can go with you and with the NFT. So I think dynamic NFTs are a very important area. I'll give you a kind of a more sort of base case, easy to understand kind of way in which NFTs can be used, which is software as a service. So, for example, if you have Adobe now, and people are kind of fed up with the software subscription model, where you pay a monthly fee to have access to something that prior to these kinds of software subscriptions models, you would actually have a physical copy, and you would be able to reinstall it and you would be able to sell it. You actually had the physical copy. Now, NFTs would allow you to create a software subscription model where you didn't have a monthly subscription, where you bought the NFT, and the NFT effectively, it's like a token gated model. But I think it's important to see that the applications and use cases for NFTs are just almost infinite. So I think they're going to have a profound impact on all kinds of different sectors and use cases over time.
Got it. That's really great to hear. I also was curious about what is Yeti Club and how the learn to earn part of it comes into play. Would you like to talk about that?
Sure. I mean, firstly, I should say that we're sort of pre-seed funding, and because of everything that happened last year, we decided to kind of take a step back. Not only all of the sort of financial problems in the space, but also the fact that AI has really exploded and has changed, and now they're talking about GPT-4, and there's already an API, so people are kind of building it into their other structures. So we kind of decided to play a bit of a slower game and take our time in terms of trying to see where this is going. But the idea of the Yeti apes was based again on this kind of concept of a PFP collection, but that each person would have a virtual assistant, basically, that over time they could specialize to fulfill certain tasks. The idea of the learn to earn model was to build a kind of a token economy to support the rollout of this and the economics, and the learn to earn bit was to do with onboarding people into Web3 and giving them skills, teaching them how to protect themselves against scams, what the differences are with wallets, simple things about DeFi and buying NFTs and NFT marketplaces and all the rest of it, so that whilst they were learning, they were earning the token, and then the token would allow them to unlock aspects of their artificial intelligence platform so that they could develop and create. So it was a kind of the idea of a circular economy, really, where we provided incentives for people to educate themselves about Web3 and onboard into the space, whilst earning something that they could actually utilize to unlock further incentives and benefits.
Got it. And is it already live, or it is something that is work in progress?
No, it's work in progress. Again, we decided really last year was so messy and then AI exploded, that we decided we're playing a longer game here, and we didn't want to go through seed funding that would affect the kind of the structural integrity of the project, because I'm sure that once you accept it's almost like a bribe in a way, and you have to then start thinking about what the exit liquidity is for the investors, and it kind of might bend you out of shape. So we're not in it for the money, we're in it to decentralize, or to help to decentralize AI.
Got it. So for our viewers, anyone who is looking to learn once it's live, maybe you can experience the Yeti Club. And that's great. I also stumbled upon your deep interest on tokenomics. So would you like to explain what is that, and why do we need tokenomics today, and what incremental benefit it is bringing to the internet today?
Yeah, tokenomics. I mean, I wouldn't consider myself an expert, but it's certainly an area that's so important to cryptocurrencies that one has to kind of like more than scratch the surface if you're in the space to try and understand. I mean, obviously we can go back to Bitcoin and understand that the limited supply has a profound impact in terms of the overall economics of Bitcoin. Tokenomics is basically a portmanteau of two words. One is token and the other is economics. So that really kind of explains what it is. There is a kind of like, if you like, an official definition, which is the study and design of the metrics and incentives that influence the economics of cryptocurrencies. So that's basically a kind of like an overview. And you can break it down into different areas. There's token supply, token allocation being, once if you effectively, pre-mint the tokens, as it were, then there's the management team, early investors, and all the rest of it. So basically, and then what's left for perhaps a treasury or a DAO, and as market supply and so on. You have a vesting schedule, and that's important because in terms of inflation, you need to know, like, when are the management team disposing of their tokens, what the time frame is, because it obviously affects the market dynamics of the token in terms of supply and demand, and therefore price. Emission schedule, which is how are the tokens being born into circulation. With Bitcoin, we have Bitcoin mining, so Bitcoin miners do work to create blocks, and when they do, they're issued rewards. Over time, the rewards with the Bitcoin halving cycle are halved, which basically puts a kind of a deflationary pressure on the overall dynamics. And then you have staking, which is similarly in terms of the proof of stake model, which again, if people are locking up their tokens, it's all to do with supply and demand, really. And then you have, of course, utility, which is a very important and often overlooked aspect to this, which is really driving demand, real utility on a network. And of course, Ethereum doesn't have a capped supply, but it has serious utility, which affects the supply and demand dynamics. I mean, I would say basically that really, if you look at the Federal Reserve model, and they can engage in quantitative easing and quantitative tightening, it's a similar kind of model. You're talking about the supply dynamics. The difference being with cryptocurrencies is that it's not dependent necessarily on human beings intervening in an ad hoc basis. So you can kind of know in advance. With Bitcoin, it's baked into the code. With other platforms, it's slightly more kind of ephemeral and can have human input. But yeah, the basic idea behind tokenomics is the kind of the architectural structure that affects the supply and demand of the cryptocurrencies in question.
And that's great. Thank you for answering that. How can somebody go about learning tokenomics right now?
Well, I'm sure there are lots of good courses. Like I said, I'm not an expert in tokenomics, so I'm not sure I could add much value in terms of, like, if you really wanted to get your head around tokenomics in terms of becoming a tokenomics expert. But there are courses, and obviously, I mean, I would say to anyone who's looking about learning anything in this space, it's all there. YouTube is an absolute wealth of different channels and information. You've got everything from whiteboard crypto, which is very simple explanations about a huge range of topics, to Paul Barron and people talking about what's going on in the market at the moment. So I I would really suggest, either look at some kind of heavy duty technical course and research what's available there, or simply get stuck into YouTube and Twitter and other places where you can learn for yourself.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks for that. Again, shifting gears and moving on to something we discussed earlier. What's the advantage of a decentralized AI over a centralized AI?
Well, the advantage is that the network participants in a decentralized form of AI get to share in the value and the development and the use of their data. I mean, it's very, if you look at what crypto is all about, really, you can just go back to crypto. It's about a new kind of value paradigm. So that's why people refer to it as the Internet of Value. Really, what we're looking at, perhaps you could look at the Internet as being the democratization of access and exchange of information. And now what we're looking at is the democratization of access to and exchange of value. And that architecture can be applied to artificial intelligence as much as any other kind of asset that can be represented digitally. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Well, Brian, it was great. Vishal, you want to say something?
No, I was just saying that it was great having you, Brian. I think we learned a lot, especially my key takeaways, the decentralized AI and how you are also building an ecosystem for people to learn, leveraging NFT, the
I
entire
love the
concept of
learn to earn
BFP.
idea. Uh,
Yeah,
I've seen it at
yeah.
a couple of places.
But what I will remember after going back from this podcast is the narrative on the history of NFT. I found that very interesting. It has a potential to be a documentary on Netflix. So yeah, it was great.
Yeah, it's a starting point. I mean, there are lots of other sort of points on that timeline, on that arc of time that can be included. But I think it's helpful to, it's very early for people to start thinking about the history of this stuff, the history of crypto.
You should consider writing it as a script and selling it as a documentary to Netflix because they might buy. So I leave you with that thought.
Yeah. Well, sooner or later, people are going to be interested in this journey, aren't they? So yeah, I'm just starting to gear up for that.
Yeah. And if they agree, please don't forget to give me 5% royalty for the idea.
Oh, you got it.
Looking
Great.
forward to your book as well. Send us the Amazon links when it's live.
I will do, surely.
Great. Thank you so much, Brian, for the podcast. It was great.
Thanks.
Thank you. Pleasure to speak to both of you. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, have a great day.
You too.
Bye.
Bye.